excited to have you here today. You're looking lovely, but it's morning time where you're at, correct?
It is. It's a decent hour of the morning too, which is a nice change when I'm talking to you Americans. It's
Yeah,
normally
it was
3 a.m.
interesting because when we first had this planned, we had it planned for what was it? 3 in the morning your time. And I
Yeah.
have to say, you did something that I was very impressed with. And a lot of people hesitate to do this, but the way you approached it worked because you said, I'm really excited to be on the Facebook Live for the podcast Rockstar Club. And I'm wondering, could we move it later because that's 3 o'clock in the morning for me and 3 is not my best time of the day. And I thought, is that not amazing? I appreciate that you told me that because I didn't know. And oftentimes when we tell a host something, they can make a decision based on the information. So thank you for that. I want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I appreciate you moving it because I'm happy to turn up at 3 a.m., but it is a disservice to you because I'm not going to, there is no way I am a 3 a.m. person. So I'm not going to be at
Absolutely.
my best for you.
Oh my goodness. I don't know that I've ever done a 3 a.m. I think the earliest I've ever done is about a 5 a.m. And even
Yeah.
that was pushing it. So I've got Rochelle Marie here, and she is the founder and the proprietor, the entrepreneur of Her Leadership Way. And you can find her at herleadershipway.com. I want to make sure that we put that out to the group. And Rochelle, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself, what it is you do, and what made you decide to join the podcast Rockstar Club? Because you're out there rocking it. So let's start with what you do.
Thank you. Thanks for asking, Kathleen, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. When I first joined the group, I was like, "Oh, 3, that's me. I'm going to do that because I want to talk to Kathleen." So here I am. So what I do is work with career mums, and I have a membership group for career mums who are back in their career. They've raised their kids. They spent a bit of time out of the workforce, whether that's a year on maternity leave or like me, I had 12 years out of the career world. And they get back into their career and they get to a point where they're stuck and they become really frustrated with it. For me in particular, and the women that I work with, we often get to a point in our career before having children where we were doing really well and
Mhm.
we were in a leadership position. And then our confidence sort of takes a little bit of a dive. We come back in, it's a bit of a different world from when we left. We're not quite sure how to navigate it anymore. We're not quite sure if, people have changed, the culture's changed. And we get to a certain point again, and it's like, I was here before. It's taken me this long to get back to where I already was. And so now I'm more than ready to move ahead. But nobody else sort of has seen that part of your journey but you. So
Right.
I really work with women to help them get past that point of stagnation and frustration through what I call the glass shelf part of an organization into that middle management level.
And how long have you had your business?
I started this business in July last year.
Okay.
So
Okay. And how's it
not
going?
long. It's going good and it's going slowly
Okay.
because I'm impatient.
Well, and you
So
started it in the middle of a pandemic. Am I
yes,
correct? It's like,
yes,
okay, let's see how tough we can make it. Let's do it in the middle of a
exactly.
pandemic. And so congratulations for starting your business and congratulations for sticking with it. Now, when you started, what were some of the ways that you had heard would be good to get the word out about your business? And what were some of the ways that you were using?
So the beginning for me was all about organic Facebook marketing. That was what I was told to do, and so I did a lot of that at the beginning,
Hmm.
and I struggled with it in a couple of ways. One is I think business to business is a lot easier in that space. It's a lot easier to connect with business owners because they're keen to find out more information and they're looking for it. Business to consumers is a little bit of a different psychology and a different market. And the Facebook groups that cater to business to consumers don't generally have promotional options. You don't
Ah,
get to go into those Facebook groups and suddenly say, "Hey, I run a business, come and join me."
right, right.
So that was difficult. So I found some groups that did have my target market, but I had to be very intentional with commenting on posts that had to do with my expertise and sort of help people in that space. And so I did that for quite some time, and it was just super slow. And I just looked at it and I was like, it's a lot of time and effort to go into very little return.
Right, right. It's like making one call at a time. It's a slow process, where now you're on board with podcasting. And I'm curious, when did you realize that maybe podcast interviews might be the way to go?
I think I did a bit of a strategy session. So I try and do a strategy session every 3 months and just look at what's worked and what hasn't worked. And that was when I sort of recognized, well, I feel like I'm playing small right now, and I want to start playing a larger game. And so that's where podcasts came into my vision. And at the same time, I was actually approached by a lady in another entrepreneurs group that I was in to do something that I turned down. And then I went back to her and I said, hey, just another thought though, how about I join you on your podcast to talk about X, Y, and Z? And she's like, you know what, that would really work. Let's do that. So that was sort of my first foray into it. And then very quickly I thought, oh no, what am I going to say?
You figure that out later.
Well, that's how I found you, was searching for, what am I now? Here I am. I've got a podcast to do. I have no idea what I'm doing. So I need some help. And that's where I found you.
Interesting. And I want to point out to everybody that the one thing that really can work for you is that visibility, because when you have moms who are looking for coaching and guidance, getting back into a business or starting a business or getting back into the workforce, they're going to reach out to the people who are most visible. And that's the beauty of podcast shows, is that you do get that visibility very quickly. Now, when was your very first podcast show?
So I think that episode, I sat down with her about November last year, but it didn't get aired for quite some time. I think 3 months for that one to get aired.
So that would have just been this last February?
It was February, yeah.
Okay,
middle of February, I think that one went live.
Okay, so when you joined the podcast Rockstar Club, really, in reality, you didn't have any podcast interviews under your belt, so to speak.
No, okay. I couldn't say to someone, hey, look at this past interview. Here I am. I had nothing to show.
And when did you join the podcast Rockstar Club?
So must have been just before that. So early November, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking November, December, January, February, about 4 months ago. And how many interviews have you secured up to this point and delivered?
So I've secured 7. And 6, I think, have aired now.
Okay.
And then talking with you.
Okay. So 7 for 7. So what have been the results of the shows that you've been on? I want to talk about kind of the 30,000 foot view. And then I want to drill down into strategy of how you have found the show, and then what your vision moving forward is. So what are some of the results that you've experienced?
Yeah. So I think a couple of the reasons that I wanted to do it was to drive traffic to my Facebook group, but also to drive some authority within my Facebook group, to start building that, this person is someone that I can trust and listen to because she's visible in other places and she has a message that she's sending. So I think the drive traffic to Facebook group has worked better than the organic Facebook posts. I didn't have high expectations in the early stages, though. I'm treating this as a build up over time strategy. So I'm not expecting a lot from my initial podcast, but I'm expecting to build on that. So I've definitely had more people join me in the Facebook group, though, and they come pre-warmed, I guess, that they're really good people that are coming and joining me now. So I'm really appreciating that.
Well,
And
and
then
I do want to point one thing out before we go further. I want to point out how quickly you've hit the ground running. And everybody that I've interviewed up to this point kind of has the same story of like, you know what? I just rolled up my sleeves. I went through the training, I implemented the information, and I got results. And the reality is that one or two interviews is not going to do much good at all. Sure, it's fun and it's nice to see your name online and all that. But if you're truly using this as a strategy for your business, it's about high concentration, and it's about consistency, and it's the long game. Because there are things that you could do today that 3 years from now will reap the rewards for. And there are other things that you'll do that you'll get immediate results. But the more you're on shows, the more you're viewed as an influencer and an expert, and the more likely it is that people are willing to pull out their credit card and give you money. I mean, that is just a fact of life. Now, some people in this group may not be looking to sell anything, and that's great. But for most of the people, we are entrepreneurs, and we're here to make some revenue. So, what would you say were some of the first foundational pieces that you needed to put in place before you really went out and looked for opportunities?
I think there are a few. So definitely the media page that you taught us to put together. So that was one of the first things that I put together before I started approaching other people to be on their podcasts. And I also put together a web page to sort of go with that, because depending on who I was approaching, I don't send that bio page out to them immediately. I wait and see if they ask for it. I don't want to overwhelm them with information to start with. But I do let them give them the link to the page in case they want to click that. So I had those two pieces, and then I had a freebie, a giveaway. So from the very first podcast that I was on, I was able to say, it was based around confidence, and I was able to say, I've got an offer for your audience, and I would love them to sign up for this mini course on confidence. It's absolutely free. Just go to the website and you'll find it there. And so that has been key. So the people that sign up for that, then also that directs them to the Facebook group as well.
Okay. And what is it about the Facebook group that encourages people to go to the next step in your business?
So I see the Facebook group as my newsletter, I guess. I see that
Okay.
as building the know, like, and trust factor. And so from there, I talk about my pillars of my business, like what it is that they work on to get promoted faster than if they're going to do it by themselves. And it all leads into the membership group that I have for them to join. So the content in the Facebook group is me not necessarily being the expert, but engaging with them, having conversation with them, and all roads lead to the membership group.
Excellent. Okay. So it's really about gaining that visibility, having your foundation in place, driving traffic, and then all roads lead to the membership group, which there's a fee for people being a part of that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Excellent. Excellent. So ultimately it is about being able to serve your market and generating revenue. And I want to remind people that this is Kathleen Gage with the podcast Rockstar Club. And if you are not a member, if you're watching this after the fact, you can go to powerupforprofits.com/podcast rockstar. That's powerupforprofits.com/podcast rockstar. And I'm talking with Rochelle Marie, and she is with Her Leadership Way. And you just need to go to herleadershipway.com. That's herleadershipway.com. And what will they find on that site as far as something that could help them to build their business or to get in the right mindset? What is your gift that you give to people?
So I have two what I call lead magnets or freebies for people. So one is that mini confidence course. So a lot of, with career mums, it is that we've had a drop in confidence between being in our career and having kids and going back again. And then the other is a workbook, a mini workbook on managing up. So a lot of us struggle when we're in large organizations. We have managers still that are not particularly good at leading. We struggle a lot with that. And so I put together a mini workbook for people to really be able to understand how to manage up so that they get promoted. So not only does it make life easier, but their bosses start singing their praises even if they're not in the room. So
Excellent. Excellent.
that. Yeah.
Now, from the first show that you appeared on to now you've got 7 or 8 under your belt. What's been the biggest change that you've noticed as far as your confidence level, your ability to communicate your message, answering the questions? What would you say are some of the clear distinctions that you've noticed?
I'm definitely starting to hone my message more.
Okay.
So with my first one, I really had no idea what I was even going to talk about, or how I was going to present it or anything. So I definitely feel as time's gone by, I've really honed my message. That has also helped me inside my Facebook group and in my business, sort of that clarity that I've had to get from talking to different people. I don't tend to go to the podcast with like there's no script or pre-formed answers, and most of them have been, they will question me and don't give me the questions in advance.
Right.
They'll just question me and it's a conversation, and I love having conversations, so I'm more than happy to do podcasts in that way. The only thing I have sort of pre-prepared is that if they ask me, I have a freebie, go to my website, here's my website address. And that's sort of the only pre-prepared stuff I have. But even then, with the questions they're asking me, I just have more clarity now on how I want to steer those answers, how they fit in with my pillars of my business, and how sort of all that content entwines together. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah, definite clarity, not just in podcasts, but in my whole business is where it's led to. Yeah.
Excellent. And we've got Colleen on the live right now. She says, hi there, Sandy Phillips Kirkham. She's been a rock star at doing this. She says, hello, Connie Reagan Green. I've known Connie for, gosh, Connie, I think I'm going to age myself here, but 15 or 20 years. Connie just did a book launch, did phenomenally well with that, and is using podcast interviews. She's got quite a bit of experience, which is so interesting because we get everything from people who have never been on a podcast to very seasoned entrepreneurs on podcasts that are going through the podcast Rockstar Club, because it's always good to get a refresher no matter how much you know. And what I'm curious of, one thing I would like to encourage you to look at when you have something to give people, rather than saying freebie, I would invite you to consider saying a complimentary resource that will help you too, and whatever it's going to help people to do, because then it frames it in more value than, well, here's something free. And so I'm going to encourage, and the challenge that everybody will deal with when they come on these lives is, I'm going to coach you on the call. It's like, you're going to get that because it's just in my blood. So what is your process for finding shows? What would you say if you had to pick 3 ways that you find shows, and those are the only 3 ways you could use? What would they be?
So the main one still is the one that you taught me around going to Apple Podcasts, finding the podcasts that I like in my niche, and then sort of going below that and finding the, other people listen to this or similar podcasts. Because I don't want to start with, there's no way I'm approaching those big people right now. I'm not ready for that in myself. So I want to find the podcasts that have a lower threshold to get into. So that's what I'm looking for in Apple Podcasts. I am a member of a number of the groups that you talk about to join. So I'm not going to remember them off the top of my head, but
there's Podit, Podmatch, podcast guests, I think, is another one. There's quite a few.
Yeah. So I'm a member of a number of those. So I'm constantly looking for people that have hashtag find a guest, and I'll reply. I guess I'm becoming a little bit pickier now, with 7 or 8 under my belt. I will only apply for those that are looking at my target market. The first ones were a broader market. There will be people within their markets that are in my target market, but they weren't sort of niched down. So I'm starting to go, okay, I'm going to just look at those targeting perhaps parents or careers rather than, life skills or something like that. So I look for those, and I also post occasionally on those about being a guest. I don't do that a lot because if I see people doing that, I feel like it's spam. So I'll do that every, with some distance between it before I
Well, and
posted
I'm
it.
glad you mentioned that because first of all, what I really like is that in the beginning you were willing to go on just about any show just to get on shows, which I encourage people to do that. If you've not been on shows, don't be so picky in the beginning that, you really miss a lot of opportunity, because initially it's about you fine tuning your message. It's about honing your skill as a podcast guest. And then as you get shows under your belt, then you can be more specific and more targeted in the shows you're going after. And it doesn't mean you want to go after a complete mismatch, but you can be a little more general in the beginning. But as you move forward, you really can hone it down and niche it down very, very nicely. So I really want people to look at that. And, another thing that I really want to acknowledge is how quickly you've been getting on shows, and that you started just a couple of months, 3-4 months ago, and already you've done 7 shows. That's pretty phenomenal, going from no shows to now having 7. And what I think is so exciting is what you're going to find is the more shows you're on, the more shows you'll get on, because other hosts will be hearing you if they like what you have to say, and you look good on camera, your message is clear, and as hosts see that, that's how they often will find their guests. They'll approach you and say, hey, I saw you on Bob's show and I'd love to have you on my show. What are some tips that you can give to people just starting out that may be a little bit hesitant and they're waiting for everything to be perfect?
I think the number one thing is nothing's ever perfect. So give up on waiting for it to be perfect, because there's no such thing. And the practice of speaking will get you better. So you're better off just jumping in. If you finish the podcast and you think that was terrible, that's never happened to me, but if you do, you don't need to tell anybody that you were on that podcast. Don't advertise it.
I love that. Downplay it. I love that. That's great.
But it's got you the practice, and it'll bring you the confidence to do the next one that step better, where you might suddenly go, okay, well, this one I can let people know about. And there was one that I was a little bit hesitant to let people know about, because I'd been it was sort of a bit of a more personal slant on the interview, which I don't know that I'll do again, but this particular podcast lent itself to that. So I was a little bit vulnerable, and I really second guessed, do I want this to go out there? In the end, I was like, no, this is me. I'm authentic. If this is life, if it helps one person, then I'm going to let people know about it. And I got some really good feedback on it. But
and I think what you're going to find, Rochelle Marie, is that as you do share who you are, and your motives are clean around it. It's not like you're doing it for shock value or you're doing it for sympathy or anything. It's just like, here's something that I never have shared before. I'm going to share it now. What you're going to find is you start really attracting that community of people who want to do business with you because it's you. And that's the thing that I encourage people to keep in mind is, you're on a podcast to be who you are. It's not about trying to be something that you're not. It's about truly being again, the overused word authentic, but your authentic self. And we've got some comments here. Heidi Tucker says, resource instead of freebie. Fabulous. Colleen says, it's hard to know until you've done a couple. True, Colleen. And that's why you just get out there and do it. And then Gerald says, does Rochelle spend time each day searching for new podcasts? If so, how much time do you spend? So how would you answer that one, Rochelle?
Yeah, no, I do a chunk of time once a week to spend searching for new podcasts. So I work full time as well. So this is still a side hustle for me. I don't have, a million hours a week to be able to do my business. And so I'm very focused on what I do, and I'm very focused on doing the things that will move my business forward. And so I have 2 hours on a Sunday that I spend searching for podcasts. I have a template email that I tailor for every person that I email to. And I also make sure I listen to at least one episode of every podcast.
You just read my mind. Yeah.
At least one, if not 2 or 3. I'll look for topics that are around my niche. And that way I can say, hey, I really enjoyed that. It really spoke to me. I see a gap here. this is, I didn't agree with this piece of it and would love to come on and, talk a bit further about this.
That's
So
awesome. And again, that's why we're doing this particular episode later in the day than I normally do. It was because you asked, you simply said, would that be possible? And you weren't demanding, you weren't like, well, I can't believe you're doing it in the middle of my night. And I've had people approach me like that. And it's like, do you realize what you're doing? You're cutting yourself off here. And so you want to keep in mind that hosts are very busy. One of the things I really encourage people to look at is if you send a message to a host and you don't hear back, send another one a few days later and just say, hey, I don't know if you got my message. I had a situation recently where I wrote an article, 1,000-word article for a magazine, and I had sent it to them 3 times, I think, and I never heard back. So finally I found the woman on LinkedIn and I private messaged her and I said, I don't know if you're getting my messages. Well, it turns out all of them went into spam. So don't assume if you send a message to a host and they don't respond that they've actually gotten your message. You want to try a few different ways. Besides email and besides a form on somebody's website, what are some other creative ways that you have found to reach out to a host?
At this point, most of it has been that, but also Facebook Messenger. So if it's someone that I see, and that also has its own issues where, sometimes those messages go to other messages so you don't get through to them. But that's another way that I've tried, is using Facebook Messenger, especially if I haven't had a response. So I will send 3 emails and with a gap. I actually have a sizable gap. I think that's just because I am not quick enough to get back to it. But I've had confirmations after a sizable gap, so it's not the worst thing. If you've not followed somebody up, don't not follow someone up. Still do it, even if there has been time between that and the last one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, do you ever use LinkedIn as a way to find podcast opportunities?
So because I work full time, I've had an issue around conflict of interest with LinkedIn. So I've had to be very, very careful of how I use LinkedIn for business.
Okay.
So I've very recently started up a second LinkedIn profile. So
I
I am
see.
going to start
Okay.
doing that now. But for the first sort of 6 months, or even very recently, really, I've had to be very, very careful of how I use it because I can get in
Okay,
trouble.
I see. Okay, so with your job, it could be a conflict of interest with what you're doing with podcasting. Got it. And that's great that you're aware of that. I mean, I have to say I've been really impressed with watching your progress, and I remember, the first time I saw you doing whatever you were doing in the Facebook group, and you've gone so quickly and so efficiently, and I really want to congratulate you, which really says something to the quality of your work and your business. So I'm excited to see what comes next, and I would encourage people, if you have questions, please ask the question. And I want to follow up on Gerald's question here with how much time from when you first start researching a show to actually securing the show and then getting on the show, how much time would you say it takes to, if you were just to give a ballpark number, is it a half hour per episode to get from beginning to end? Is it an hour? Is it 2 hours? What can people expect in their research time, their outreach, and then their delivery?
I would say probably 3 to 4 hours
Okay.
per episode. Most of my episodes have been an hour long that I've taped. So there's that. And then, like I said, I listen to at least 1, if not 2 episodes. So I include that in that time. And then depending on the number of emails that I write, I will often as well write a review for a podcast and screenshot that and add that to my email.
Excellent.
Just because the podcasts that I'm targeting right now are very, they're not well reviewed yet.
Right.
I know what a difference that will make for them to have those reviews get started. So I take the time to listen. I post a review from, an honest review on their podcast, but then I'll screenshot that and send it to them and just say, I've done this because I really do enjoy your podcast and I know this will help you.
Excellent. I mean, that's such a great recommendation. I I've never done that. And I think that's a really good tip. So, I'm learning from you as much as you're learning from me.
Do follow up and
Mm-hmm.
do personalize every email. Don't just think that you get to put a template together and that's it. You send that to excuse me, you send that to 10 people. I think we need to remember, particularly when we're starting out and we don't have a podcast of our own, that the people we're sending these emails to are humans and have egos and have, they're also trying to build their businesses, and they've chosen to do it through hosting a podcast. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like the empathy, which is one of the big things I teach as a leader. Put yourself in their shoes. Who would you want? How would you want to be contacted by somebody?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I had twice in the last few days, I've had two people blow me off from interviews, and I'm like, are you serious? And one, it was at the last minute. Oh, sorry, I can't make it. And I'm like, are you serious? And with another one, I've actually 3 times she's rescheduled, and each time there was an excuse. And I said, I really don't feel like this is a fit. And she said, well, why? I thought I was such a great fit. And I said, because you never show up. And the thing to really consider with a host is we put that time aside, we work our day around it. And this is not the only thing we do. I mean, there are hosts that have full-time jobs. There are hosts that are running a very busy consulting business. There are hosts that are writing books. So there's other things that are going on. So really be conscientious of the time that the host is investing, the time you're investing. And a tip that I gave to somebody earlier today is, when you schedule your interview, once it's scheduled, block out time before and after that's just blocked out time, so that nobody's going to call you. Put it on your calendar so nobody can schedule anything. If you use a scheduler like I use Time Trade, once it's blocked out, nobody can schedule over that. And then block out time after, just in case the interview goes longer. And you want to make sure that you're on time. And Rochelle, thank you for being on time today. And I was the reason that it was late. I said, Rochelle, this is what you don't do on an interview, exactly what I'm doing right now. So we got real life experience, but really be aware that you're using somebody's time. And so use it effectively. A thank you card can go a long ways. I know that, if it's international, that can be difficult, but a thank you email always works nicely. And I want to answer Gerald's question about LinkedIn. Gerald, I use LinkedIn a lot with what I do. And what I do is I look for specific niches, and mine happens to be quite a bit within the plant-based and vegan industry. I'm building that market very, very nicely. And as a result of some of the strategies that I've used on LinkedIn, like searching on keywords, looking for people who are influencers in that industry, seeing what shows they've been on to see if I can get on those same shows. I actually have been invited to be a part of 2 summits so far, and this is in a very short period of time. I also have been invited to do a welcome video for a summit page, where when people come to this page, there's something like 12 or 15 speakers. I'm going to be the one welcoming them, and I'm going to say, this is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health. And you can't buy that kind of promotions. I mean, that is better than advertising. And so it's all about really being strategic in how you're finding people on LinkedIn. And there actually is, in the training, a full lesson on how to use LinkedIn and the different social media. So I would encourage you, go into the training material, because you'll find quite a bit there. So Rochelle, before we close up, I want to see if anybody else has more questions. What are your final thoughts for people as we move forward?
I just wanted to pick up on one thing that you were talking about earlier around showing up on time. So I had one show where this is a time zone issue, which, it is tricky being in different time zones and particularly being overseas. And one of the hosts was I think he was in Washington, DC.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked up the time zone, I just typed in Washington and not, yeah. So I was ready to go at the time that I thought our meeting was, and
Mhm.
he hadn't sent me a meeting invite, which would have solved the problem. Then it would have
Right.
shown up at the right time on my calendar, but he hadn't done that. So I was ready to go. Only he'd been ready to go, I think it was 1 or 2 hours earlier, and I didn't realize at all. And so I really quickly scrambled to send him an email. I tried to phone him. I had a phone number. I tried to phone him and just profusely apologized, let him know what had happened, you know, and said, I'm happy to do it again. If you're happy to, I would love to meet with you anytime. And he was wonderful and said,
Right.
no, let's do it now. Completely understand. Let's do it now. So I was, able to continue on with that. So I guess it's just to say again, be very mindful of the host and understand that letting them down like that is a big deal. And it was the last thing that I wanted to do, but I was authentically apologetic, and I think he appreciated that.
You
So
brought up a couple of good points. And in one, that was a 3 hour time difference. Washington, D.C. is
right.
on the East Coast, and then Washington State is on the West Coast. And so that's pretty substantial. And you brought up a couple of really good things that you should ask for. Get a phone number and hopefully a cell number. And this is what I have on the back of mine. Ask me about my podcast, and which people do. And so I give them a card. But that was a little squirrel there, but get their phone number, get their email address, confirm the time change. Say, okay, right now it's whatever time, and I'm assuming your time is X, whatever it may be, to make sure you're clear on that. The day before, you could send a confirmation saying, I'm really excited to be on your show, just because you never know what could slip through the cracks. And right now, there's so much going on in the world that if for whatever reason somebody doesn't show up. I was talking to somebody earlier today who actually was with a patient when our call was supposed to happen, and she wrote and apologized. I said, you know what, I'm just glad you're okay. And it was kind of a similar thing that she had not planned for certain things in her day. We worked through that. It was a good teaching moment, which is, make sure you have that buffer time. But I always go automatically to did something happen to them? They couldn't possibly be blowing me off. That's not possible. But quite seriously, it's like I do get concerned about people in light of everything that's going on. So let me see if there's any more questions. Okay, I don't see any more questions. What are your final thoughts? And before you give me your final thoughts, I want to make sure that people know where to find you, which is herleadershipway.com. That's herleadershipway.com. This episode will air on YouTube. It's going to go on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on a number of different audio platforms. We're going to do a blog post around it. That's why I encourage members, go out and get your 3 interviews. Let me know so that we can schedule you in for a live. This is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health and Power Up for Profits. This is the podcast Rockstar Club. If you're not yet a member, check it out. It's powerupforprofits.com/podcast rockstar. That's powerupforprofits.com/podcast rockstar. And I want you to notice what I just did. I gave Rochelle's web address and I spoke it slowly. I said it twice. I gave my web address. I spoke it slowly, gave it twice. That's what you want to do. You don't want to rush through your web address, and you don't need to put the www dot. You don't need to do that. Just go right into the URL, but speak it slowly, say it twice. A little tip that works really well is when they say, well, how can people get in touch with you? You go, thank you so much for asking. What that does is it gives time to people to register. Oh, there's a web address coming. Because if you just immediately go into it, people can miss it. So keep in mind that people are hearing you often for the first time until they become a fan or a raving fan, a follower of yours. So with that in mind, what are your closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts are really to encourage everybody just to do it. So step away from your fears, step away from your perfection. Stop thinking that this is about you. This is about you getting your message out to as many people as you can. And so that's sort of the biggest way that I could step out from fear, is just saying, well, this isn't about me. If people say no, I don't want you on my podcast, that's not about me. They don't know me. It just means I try again and again until I get a yes. So just do it.
Outstanding. Well, I want to say thank you so much for your time today, Rochelle. This has been delightful. You're doing great. I look forward to seeing what happens over the next year with you, because I know you're going to just be a total rock star, more than you already are, and you've just blossomed so nicely. And I want to encourage members, go out and implement the information in the training. It really does work when you roll up your sleeves and you do it. Any member who gets 3 interviews as a result of the training and you've delivered the interviews, contact me, because I'd love to get you on a live so you can share your strategies. You can get some great promotions, because we're going to put this all over the place. And I encourage people, go out, get your message out to market. And like Rochelle said, it's not about you. It's about the message you're here to carry to the market. So with that, I want to say thank you to everybody. Have a great day. And Rochelle, many blessings to you, and enjoy your day.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I've really enjoyed the interview.
Thank you.